Welcome to another episode of Business with Passion. Each show features guests who have transformed their long-term passion into a successful business. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton Roth. My marketing strategy business grew from my love of talking with passionate business owners. In this series, I share their passion with you. So if you're looking for inspiration to enhance your business passion, keep watching.
My long-term passion is my mission as an artist, which is to inspire deeper self-awareness in others through my creativity. Growing up, my parents always promoted finding what I wanted to do, and they always supported that for me. So there was this open landscape of finding myself and seeking that out through our whole growing up spiritually. And they provided me with a canvas to look for that, and I am finding it now. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, in this great dead-end street outside Philadelphia, Four Seasons. It was, in a way, a paradise for a kid. We had woods, we had a creek, we would play games at night. The experience with being able to play in the neighborhood, we could play as long as we were in earshot of my mom's train whistle that she kept on her keychain. So as long as we could hear that whistle, and the sun would be coming down and we'd be looking at each other, my sister and I have one sister, and there was always that question of, can we hear the whistle? So we'd be playing some game, and as soon as you'd hear the whistle, it would be instant stop, play, and make our way home. And that environment, I'm appreciating it more as I'm getting older, how amazing it was to have the freedom to explore and play. And that was so much of my growing up. We'd walk to school, public school. It was actually an amazing place to grow up. I was being creative as a boy, drawing, but it wasn't something that I would look back and say, oh, I was creating art. And so I think I was really influenced by my father's job, that I'm going to grow up and maybe be a consultant. Or I did my undergrad work at Brown University in Rhode Island, and they have a exchange program with RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, so you can just take classes there. So I didn't take many art classes in high school, but there was something about taking this photography class. So enrolled in the class, and that was where I was in the darkroom for the first time as a sophomore at Brown, walking down the hill to RISD, and being in that whole environment where it was just, to be there now would be amazing. But there was just art everywhere, but I didn't really have any access to it. I was a Brown student taking an introductory to photography, and so it was being in that environment that was the first time that I was in the darkroom, and being creative with this intention was what was really different for me. And the one thing that really influenced me, in the class they say, okay, you have to come up with 12 images to have at the end of the class. And so what are you going to do your theme on? And I was thinking, and I didn't have anything to do. And at the time, Rick Smolin, who's a local guy here, who did the series of the Day in the Life series. So that was completed, and he was there showing the outtakes of the USSR at the time and America, and putting all the ones that they didn't use in the books, slide projector time, back and forth, and sitting there, and that was probably one of the most amazing ideas I've ever seen. And here I am, a little sophomore, not really doing anything creative, having to come up with a project, and I was so inspired by that the next morning, I think very relatedly, the next morning I woke up and I had my idea for the project, which was here's my bright idea that was fantastic for me. I went around and I knocked on people's doors in the community and asked to photograph them with one of their favorite objects in their house. And the experiences I had with people doing that was, in a way, it was the birth of this interactive thing. But I found that as I got farther and farther away from RISD, people did not let me in their doors, right? It was kind of like you could just draw these concentric circles of, people standing in their doorway going, great idea, but I'm not letting you in my house. But close to RISD, come in, sit down, watch my baby. I mean, it was this incredible access through art that I think if I had done a different kind of project, I mean, it's so imprinted upon me that you can use creativity to do things you've never done before. I mean, I could have done a reflections or shadows or something that's pretty introductory to photography kind of theme, but I think that Rick Smolin's presentation, and I got to meet him later and say, I was doing a shoot and I was using his boy's hands at the farmer's market, and then I turned around and Rick Smolin's there, and I was like, oh my God, I get to thank you for inspiring me. I mean, here I am, you know, 20 years later doing this, and your presentation, I think, really set the course for me. I was interested in photography, and I came out to this area, and I was doing some different jobs, and I had this experience at RISD, I'm totally connected to it. And I think I had to be a photographer was this kind of ace up my sleeve. But it was a card up my sleeve, and I didn't know it was an ace, but if I didn't pull it out, it was always an ace. And so I was doing a couple years of doing these things, and it was just in my mind of, wow, to be a photographer. I mean, that would be amazing. But I wasn't doing anything about it. And I was, you know, probably 21, 22, out of college, out here working different jobs. And so in response to, I have to find out what this card is, but it's not a matter of just pulling it out and saying I'm a photographer. So the effort of that to look into it was taking a phone book, starting in photographers, and just starting with the first person and calling and saying, can I work for you? And they would say, the first person said, well, send me some resume and, you know, send it in. I'm thinking, that's great. So yeah, thanks. And I write the name down. I got to send it to, you know, J, you know, Adams or something. And so then I call the next one, and they say the same thing, and I'm thinking, this is amazing. So I write it down. And so after 5 in a row of them saying, yeah, send something in, I realize, I don't think that this is what I'm going to get a job for. So every call that I made, then I started to tell them where I wanted to do, and eventually I started working with a guy who, luckily, his last name was Anderson. And so I worked with him, and he kind of taught me about the business and about the world of photography. And then this next part of that is I took a trip overseas, and I went to Nepal. And the intention of going to Nepal was, can I take some images that will stand alone and really speak to, like, these are great, and I don't need to know Robert, I don't need to know Nepal, these are great images. And so I came back from that trip, and I shot all slides, and I remember I was in this little apartment in the city right in Russian Hill. And I just remember I poured a glass of wine, and I loaded in the trays. I didn't look at any of the images. I just loaded the trays up, and I just put them in there, and I was alone in this little tiny place, and I cleared off the wall, and I just sat there, and I just looked at image after image. And it was, at the time, I mean, people don't have this kind of access. I mean, the images were 4 by 6 feet on the wall, and so just to see that, and that was the start of, I can do this, I think. I mean, I left at the end of the bottle of wine, and the end of the last carousel was, I'm going to go for it. So I printed up a bunch of images, went to the lab, the professional lab, and here I'd like to get some 11 by 14 prints. I'm going to be a photographer. And so they printed it up, and I went to Flex, and I got the portfolio, and I slipped everything in. And then I was me with a bunch of 11 by 14 prints in a portfolio. But that was there was something about that to make that book that was the start of it. And how I ended up doing this for a living was that a friend of mine called me and said, there's an event going on at MoMA. He was an architect. They need a photographer now. Can you get it? We're all, people in the office were calling people up. I was there. I was living in the city at the time. Okay, I hadn't done many jobs. I jumped on my motorcycle at the time, and I strapped my bag, and I rushed ride down to MoMA. And who's there doing the event before MoMA's open is Stanley Gaddy, who's a big event producer in the city. Amazing guy. So, hi, I'm Robert, I'm Stanley, the guests are coming, black tie, the Haas's, the Schwabs, you know, in there. So I ended up shooting this job in 15 minutes, and we're running out the back door while they're coming in the front with their tuxedos. And that was the start of, he loved the images, and then I started doing jobs that way. So 14 years, I never sent I never marketed, I've never done anything. It's been this word of mouth kind of thing, but that was sort of the start of it, a phone book and a phone call from a friend that just happened to hit me when I was home. My business is my experience of representing a place through photography of its details. So I convey an essence of a place. So, which is what's so great about being here. So coming to a home like this and conveying the place through the details of its images. And I can do that for collections, I do that for homes, I do that for hotels, I do that for basically any place that I can tell the story of it and get the essence of it through its details. And so combining my business in this way is the difference now than what I was doing for the last 14 or 15 years, which is now there's a connection. The photography means something to me. And so doing that kind of approach and representing a place through its essence connects people to the place in which they are. So that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So whether it's a home here, so the owner can really connect to the place and they've never seen their house the way I do it. Or it's a hotel or shooting something for the Marriott, and then their customers connect with the hotel in a way that they haven't quite. They connect, their experience is embodied in these images that I make of it. So this connection that I have, it's almost a philosophical connection that I have, because to find these images, which is the experience of finding them rather than making images. And that was the whole experience for me. I have a friend who's an advertising photographer, and my friendship with him realized I'm not an advertising photographer in that I don't have a big set. I don't have a stylist and people on set. And I recently did a job with Oracle to do the details of their headquarters. They were doing a commemorative piece. And when I was in the meeting with them, it was so perfectly aligned. And they were walking down, the designer saw my brochure on the desk and was like, that's what I want the images to look like. But in the meeting, they were saying, they were a little hesitant because it was just me. They were like, who's your crew? And I was like, it's just me and my tripod and my cable release. And one person in particular, the head designer, was just, they're not used to that. And I was able to really discover that the art of detail is finding images. So it's just a matter of coming in here and discovering what's already here and then stylistically presenting it. And it's become something that is applicable in every kind of situation, and everyone has a slightly different connection to it, whether it's a cafe in Sausalito, which I just did, or a place like this. So the excitement that I have around my business, because every project that I do, I'm connected to the present moment, because that's the only way I can find the detail. So for me, it's this incredible, the most gratifying experience as an artist, which I wasn't really experiencing when I was doing my other commercial work for the last 14 years. I loved working with my camera, but I wasn't really connected personally to the images. So the fact that the more connected I am personally to the images is what makes the connection for my clients connected. And so it's this incredible marriage of the two that is what is making it so gratifying. I mean, showing a homeowner their house in my images or the book I make for them, to see them light up. I mean, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I loved finding that image too. And it doesn't, for me, if it's a guitar collection or a hotel, it doesn't matter. I shoot everything the same way in that I'm looking and I'm in the present moment. And the fact that I can tie that into my business now is just so thrilling, because there's no end to the process of my work now. So this is pretty typical. I'll come into a property and I'll come into the yard, I'll come into the side area, and there'll be a beautiful garden. And then for me, it's figuring out what is in the space. So here we have these great place, and I'll think, here I may focus on something in one of the roses, beautiful roses. So you know, what's an essence of a rose? And then I'll keep exploring. I'll keep looking at an area. What is the relationship of things? Is it a flower with the wall? Is it the wall itself? Or, you know, a lot of places have these great elements, like this great fountain, this great lion. So looking at the lion, it's, you know, what's the essence of the lion? And how to convey that in an image. And oftentimes it's in the detail. And it's the relationship of it and getting in there and really speaking to what is the essence of the thing that I'm shooting. A lot of times the details are right under my feet. So
looking down, looking up, looking down. So I look down and see what I can find of where it is I'm standing. And after I explore that, I'm really getting a sense of where am I? So being here at the front of the house, I think, how do I convey that sense of home? Entranceway, where does someone come into their house every day? A lot of times what I'm doing is relating things to each other. How do I convey something relative to what's around it? So exploring something here. And then I look more detailed. Then I look more into an image. What else is there? And details are everywhere. So here it may be something around the doorway itself. And I may explore this in a lot of different ways. Coming into a house presents the same process of finding images. And when I come into a space, I'm looking at all sorts of things. And whereas outside I may be looking down, inside I start to look up. So looking around ceiling, floor, walls. Oftentimes if you look up, you just keep looking up. And for me, it's finding a relationship between things that really speak to the essence of where it is you're standing. And oftentimes it's finding something that just speaks to the essence through the details. Whether that's a chandelier or the steps that you are walking on every single day. It's really being present enough in where it is you're standing. A vision I have for art of detail is to use images that I'm creating in art of detail and make them available for people who are moving into low-income dwellings. So nonprofits and people moving into a place. So the current vision is a program called, I'm calling it Medici. So it's based on the Italian Renaissance Medici family that did art, and then the community really benefited from it. So the idea of how do I use the images that clients are happy to pay for, and then using those images in another way. So that's, I see that as having great potential to make images available. So if someone's moving to a house, they can come and they can pick an image that they can have on their wall that says, welcome home. And so they get a piece of art on their wall. So that kind of using images that way, whether it's in the community and with nonprofits, but leveraging and using my business in order to make art available, which connects to the mission of how to get people to really be connecting where they are and foster their own self-awareness. So the vision around the art is to really, how many ways can I get people to stop and think? Last year was the first year I did an art installation, an interactive art installation. It debuted at Burning Man, which is a festival that allows you to just, basically if you want to do art, you can do whatever you want. And each year they have a theme. So last year's theme was the American Dream. I read the Constitution, was the first thing I did, and created an art piece that asked a specific question. And the question was, to what do you pledge your allegiance? So the elements of the piece were designed to inspire people to answer the question. So this was a whole new thing for me. I've had art on the walls, I have my photography, but now I can ask you a question. And if I can create the environment inspiring enough that you say, I'll take some time and I'll answer the question. So last year's piece called Self-Evidence involved a teepee and some plaster casts of women, and it really was wanting to create a sacred space that combined the feminine, Native American wisdom, the Constitution, and then the individual declaring something about themselves that they believed in. And they answered the question on slips of paper, identical slips of paper, with everyone answered with a pencil. And they wrote it on the piece of the strip of paper, and they fastened it inside the teepee. And at the end of the week, there were 1,200 slips of paper hanging inside the teepee. And it was amazing. And the experience for me
of sitting in the teepee, and this opened the door to this kind of art, was the moment someone sitting in the teepee and the strips of paper were there, and there was an audio inside playing nonstop the whole week the piece was up. Sitting there thinking, and I could watch them thinking. They didn't know I was involved with the piece, and so I watched. And they would think, and the moment that they would go to grab that paper, that gesture of grabbing was, to me, the most incredible moment I've ever experienced, because that was their self-awareness. And so to see that, and then they grab it, and then they're writing, and I'm thinking, they're writing something about themselves that they didn't know 5 seconds ago. So this year, inspired by last year, realizing, wow, there's a whole new world of asking people questions through art. This year, the piece is going to debut at Burning Man. It's called Trees. It's a combination of memory and trees. The theme this year is evolution. So my response, thinking about evolution, is this belief that we make our own evolution by what we're offering right now in the present moment. So what are our feelings? How are we vibrating as energy beings? That's sort of my belief, and that's what makes our lives. So how can I, as an artist, get people to think the best thoughts possible? And I thought the best memories that they have. So the piece is inviting people to declare a memory, but two different kinds of memory. One memory that's already happened in the past. So scan your life. What's one of your best memories? And so, oh, was it the time I did this or that? So present moment is great, 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 great. And then maybe they think of one and they write it down on a leaf. I'll get to that in a second. So that's the one memory. The other memory is a memory that is in the future that hasn't happened yet, but to write about it as if it already has. So to go on the other side of the memory and then write about it in the past. So that is a whole different invitation of what do you want to manifest. It's a bit like prayer flags, but instead of the wind activating them, it's all the people that are reading them. And so now there's this part of the declaration that people can make is now a direct connection in the lives that they're manifesting. One thing I'm doing now, which I totally love, I'm writing letters on an old manual typewriter. And I have these, I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I have younger friends that have younger children. And so they're just getting into an age where they can read, and so I'm creating letters to them on the typewriter. I mean, the whole thing with rubber stamps and ink and making envelopes and the wax seal on it, and I'm sending them out to these little people in the world as a way of connecting them to language, communication, creativity. And it's thrilling for me. I'm writing to them not only as a 6-year-old, but I'm realizing I'm writing them also as the 40-year-old that they're going to be, reading the letters that I'm writing today. And it's this incredible experience for me to communicate in this way to them. I love my cell phone, I love my computer, but the experience of creating on the typewriter, it's one of the most incredible creative experiences I've had. The thing that's also changed a lot with the art of detail is this process of having people become part of my team. I mean, for 15 years I was doing everything by myself. So it was kind of there was a part of me that enjoyed that, but I think because I wasn't really connected to my mission, there wasn't as much interest in having people come into it. So with the art of detail has been this new role of expanding. So a studio assistant and a bookkeeper and a publicist and a team, a framer, and it's like this idea of building a community around it. And I realized there's the synergy in that. There's synergy of just collectively we can do great things, and I'm finding that with all these other areas of my life also. But also this, I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm good with numbers. I used to think, oh, I'm great, but I'm not. I'm barely, like, I just would be, missing things. And the idea of just being able to focus on what I want to do is what's going to make, me more connected, and finding someone who loves to do bookkeeping or loves to do publicity or loves to do,
And so that process of letting go of some things it continues to be part of my process as an artist and as a person, to trust other people to do their job and to know that they do their job better than I do, and let that be the case. I think there was like, oh, I'm great at everything, and it was like, no, I'm great at some things, and I love the things I'm great at, but you know, what do I want to do? And then find people who love to do the things that I don't want to do. And so I'm really excited how this team is building and how there's a community happening that's really supporting the success. Passion for me was finding it. I mean, you have to identify it. It's there's a great Stein quote that says, if you don't go in, then you can't find out. I think a lot of life seems pretty full. The day is full. And so where do you kind of, like a bookshelf, how do you get the two books, get your hands in there and push open enough space that says, I'm going to spend this time to sort of figure out what my passion is, and whether it's meditation or doing something, but I think it requires that specific inquiry as to what do I do that I love? What gives me passion? I mean, connecting it with my photography wasn't around what can I do as a business that's gonna support me, that's passionate. It's what do I like to do as a photographer that I love? And then how can I position this as a business? So it's almost like leave the business out of the equation until you can really connect with it. And it might take for me, I met with friends, we took a year out of our lives and we specifically committed ourselves to what does it mean to be aligned with ourselves. So what's a vision? I didn't have a vision statement. I didn't write anything around that. And I'd heard for years, that's what you do. And so it was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take 5 minutes every day to read my vision. I'm gonna work on it. I'm still changing it all the time. Because it's not something that you find, it's something that you are. Anything that I'm shooting now and connecting people to place, getting them to pause enough to even look at the hotel differently or look at their house differently. It's like that process is what thrills me so much. So the experience I have of just finding the images and working with them is the effect that it has on other people is a function of how much I'm just connected to working with these images and what they represent.
Thanks for watching this episode of Business with Passion. If you'd like more information about Robert Bengtson, other shows, or perhaps to be a guest on a future show, go online to tv.manygoodideas.com.